Hi guys. Somebody asked me in the week, is it possible to improve your health if you exchange white bread in your diet for whole grain bread? Now, if that was the only dietary change that you made and you were consuming a typical Western diet, the question is, would that improve your health? Is that something that you could do in order to be able to increase your health, improve your health, and actually make you feel better? It's a very small change. And the evidence seems to suggest, if you look at the nutritional literature, the evidence seems to suggest that it is in fact the case that you could improve your health just with that small change. There have been a number of studies that have looked at whole grain bread, at whole grain products, consuming whole grain cereals in place of refined grains, and generally they show the same kinds of effects in humans. What you tend to find is that weight loss does occur, but it tends to be quite small. But what you tend to find is there is the insulin sensitizing effect. Those studies that have measured the insulin resistance in the individuals tend to find that insulin resistance declines slightly. Now, these studies are generally performed over the short term, weeks or months. So consuming, if we extrapolate these, there's no indication that this would be the case, but we could surmise that over a longer period of time, that reduction in insulin resistance may cause a gradual loss of weight, a gradual loss of body fat, and obviously insulin resistance causes or is associated with a number of detrimental changes in the body, including high blood pressure and various other risk factors for cardiovascular disease, in particularly changes to, for example, lipoprotein ratios. And studies have looked at whole grain products and found that there are improvements in lipoprotein ratios, there are reductions in blood pressure. So the answer to the question really, I think, is that yes, if you did swap your white bread that you're consuming currently and you consumed whole grain bread, you would improve your health. There are a number of caveats to explain with this. Firstly, not all whole grain bread is the same. If you go into the supermarket and you look at the breads, there's really not two types of bread, whole grain and white. There are actually a spectrum of different types of breads. If we go to one extreme, the completely refined white bleached bread that has really no nutritional value at all, it's just a source of carbohydrate. That would be one end of the spectrum. That would be the lowest end of the spectrum, the lowest quality bread. It's also obviously got additives that help preserve the bread, which is why it doesn't go mouldy so quickly. And it's very starchy, and this is the lowest quality type of bread that you could consume. If we went to the other end, the best types of bread to consume are really the breads that try and retain as much of the original structure of the grain as possible. When you take a cereal grain and you mill it and you crush it, even if you leave all of the original nutrients in that bread, in the cereal to produce the bread, the actual process of crushing the grain takes away some of the benefits of the grain. And this relates to the way it's digested. If you consume a whole cereal grain, that cereal grain has obviously an outer husk. It's very difficult to digest. The starch is on the inside of the grain. It's in the endosperm layer of the grain, which is surrounded by the bran layer. And that bran is composed of fibre, and it prevents the digestive enzymes getting to the starch and slows the absorption. And this is the main benefit of consuming whole grains. When the grains are in their original whole form, they tend to have this resistance to digestion, which slows the rate that the nutrients pass into the blood. And it's the rate that the nutrients pass into the blood that dictates the ultimate health effect. If the nutrients pass into the blood slowly, it gives the cells of the body time to digest, time to deal with and metabolize the nutrients before they become problematic. If you rush a lot of nutrients into the blood quickly, you get what's called the nutrient overload syndrome, where the nutrients get shuttled into pathways that they're not normally put through, and this causes metabolic downstream problems. For example, if you consume lots of fructose, the fructose passes into the de novo lipogenesis pathway, and that gets turned into fatty acids. If you only consume a very small amount of fructose, generally that fructose is passed into a different pathway. It resynthesizes glycogen, and it's the difference in those two metabolic pathways, consuming lots of fructose or consuming a small amount of fructose, that ultimately dictates the health effect. And what we really want to avoid is this nutrient overload syndrome, where we get a rapid rise in blood sugar, and those nutrients overload the cells with energy, and that energy then is possibly one of the causes of insulin resistance. So whole grains in their whole form prevent this nutrient overload syndrome. So what we tend to find is that as you mill the grains to a finer and finer flour, you tend to lose some of the benefits of the whole grains. So the best types of bread tend to be the ones that contain the coarsest flour, and that means the ones that people generally avoid because they find them too difficult to consume. They prefer the light, fluffy flour that is more conductive to good taste. So I mean, that's not for everybody. Some people like those breads, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't be produced. But generally what you tend to find is that the finer flour tends to produce a nicer tasting bread. Now, there's another reason that whole grains may have beneficial effects when compared to refined grains, and that's because whole grain cereals also contain a number of antioxidants, and one group of antioxidants in whole grains that has been quite well researched are the alkoresorcinols. Now, the alkoresorcinols are a group of phenolic lipids, and they have a phenolic structure, and therefore they're kind of related to polyphenols, but they don't have multiple rings. They have a single ring. And they are actually classed as lipids. They're kind of a strange kind of group of phytochemicals. But a number of papers recently have looked into these antioxidants and found that they have quite significant health effects. They seem to have been overlooked for quite a number of years, and there's quite a lot of research coming out about those alkoresorcinols now. Now, it's interesting because antioxidants have been shown from fruits and vegetables and in isolated supplements to improve insulin resistance. And so one of the reasons why whole grains may improve insulin sensitivity it could be because of these alkoresorcinols. They're found in wheat, in barley and rye, and a number of other cereal grains. Oats are not a good source of alkoresorcinols, although oats do contain many other nutrients that are beneficial to the health, and oats are a very healthy food. But in terms of these alkoresorcinols, most cereals do seem to contain even small amounts of them, but wheat, barley, rye seem to have been researched most extensively in terms of looking at the content, and a number of studies have looked at the health effects of these alkoresorcinols and found that they do actually have beneficial health effects in humans. So that's quite interesting as well. Obviously, when you refine the cereal grain, you remove these alkoresorcinols, and therefore you remove the beneficial effects they have. And it's also worth pointing out that there are other antioxidants in cereal grains as well. You tend to find in plants tend to produce a number of different antioxidants, but it's just interesting pointing out these alkoresorcinols, because I think a lot of people won't have heard of them. They've only just recently been, I say recently, within the last 10 years or so, research is starting to increase the focus on these types of compounds in cereal grains, and seeing whole grains as a source of antioxidants in a similar way to fruits and vegetables, and therefore this may explain some of their health effects. So the studies that have simply replaced refined carbohydrates with whole grains, they do show a beneficial effect. If you know somebody that is consuming white bread, and you can convince them, maybe it's yourself or maybe it's a family member, if you can convince them to consume whole grain cereals, I think you would have a beneficial health effect. I think even just that small nutritional change would actually have a beneficial health effect over the long term. Of course, if you incorporated that with other changes as well, those changes tend to tend to be synergistic, and they would have probably a much larger effect, and you would probably see them over a much shorter time period. So think about whole grains. They are a very worthwhile consideration in your diet. I know it's very tempting to consume the tastier breads, and they're created for this reason, because they're tasty. People like them. They make better toast. You know, and this is the reason. But you know, whole grain. If you buy good quality whole grain breads, particularly some of the seeded breads, they can be very nice. You've got to be careful about the one that you pick, because, like I say, not all breads are created the same, and there's this spectrum of kind of quality going all the way up to these highest quality, very coarsely ground breads that are produced. So I hope that was interesting. If you've got any comments on this video, please leave them in the comments box below, and as always, I will try to get back to you as soon as possible, and I'll see you soon for another video, and in the meantime, take care.